Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon for those of you who are watching us from the other side of the Atlantic. Thank you very much for being here this evening with us. I'm Patricia Rodriguez, and I'm the director of Middlebury School in Spain. Today, I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. José Álvarez Junco, who has kindly agreed to speak to us on the subject of Catalan nationalism. For many years, Dr. Álvarez Junco has been a professor of the history of thought and social and political movements at the Universidad Complutense de Madrid. Between 1992 and 2000, he held the Prince of Asturias Chair in Spanish Culture and Civilization at Tufts University, while also chairing the Iberian Study Group at the Center for European Studies at Harvard University. From 2004 to 2008, he was the director of the Center for Political and Constitutional Studies and a member of the Spanish Council of State. He has been visiting scholar or visiting professor at the Université de Paris, La Sorbonne, El Colegio de México, Oxford University, Università di Padova, and Harvard University, among other international institutions. His research focuses on political, social, and cultural Spanish history from the 19th and 20th century. He has written, among other topics, about the political ideology of Spanish anarchism and about the figure of Alejandro Lerroux, one of Spain's more inflammatory political leaders during the Second Spanish Republic. In 2001, he published Mater Dolorosa, a comprehensive and insightful analysis of the construction of Spanish identity over the course of the 19th century. For this influential work, he received the National Essay Award in 2002 and the Fastenrath Award of the Royal Spanish Academy. His last two books also revolve around the subject of nation and nationalism. Last year, he published Dioses Útiles, Naciones y Nacionalismos. And just a few months ago, El Relato Nacional, Historia de la Historia de España, which he co-authored with Gregorio de la Fuente. He regularly writes for the national newspaper El País. I first encountered Professor Álvarez Junco's work when I was in California in graduate school a long time ago. His masterpiece, Mater Dolorosa, deeply inspired much of my research and informed most of what later became my doctoral dissertation. Back then, I did not imagine I would one day have the honor to meet you in person and introduce you to speak in front of an audience such as the one we have today. Back then, I didn't imagine either that my country, Spain, would ever reach such a dramatic political situation as the one we're experiencing these days. Many of our students have been asking us lately why so many Catalans want to separate from Spain, or why there are so many Spanish flags hanging from so many balconies in Madrid. I know that talking about Catalan nationalism in less than an hour is a very ambitious endeavor. I know that talking about Catalan nationalism may imply talking about other Spanish nationalisms. I know that you have devoted the last 25 years of your life to the study and analysis of nations and nationalisms, and that you've stated that you probably won't ever write about this topic again. However, I'm very happy to see that you're still willing to share your insights with us today. Please, everybody, help me welcome Dr. José Álvarez Junco.
Well, thank you very much. This is a very, very kind way of introducing me, very exaggerated. And thank you. Good evening to everybody, and thanks for coming. Or good afternoon. I don't know what to do. I can talk for 3 hours if you want, or 2 or 3 weeks about Catalonia and Catalan history. Remember, I'm a historian. I'm not a political analyst of the present situation, although we will go to the present situation. But I think it would be much better if I speak for, let's say, 30, 40 minutes, and then saying the most simple things. And then I will address your questions if you prefer, okay? We'll do that.
Excellent.
I will begin as a historian, I will begin by the beginning, which is the Middle Ages. Until the Middle Ages, Catalonia had no peculiarity whatsoever in relation to the rest of the Iberian Peninsula, the same as Portugal, for instance. This is the Iberian Peninsula, Balearic Islands and the Canary Islands over there. The Iberian Peninsula was under Roman domination, was a part of the Roman Empire, and then under Islamic occupation. And it was then, at the beginning of the struggle against the Muslims, when the kingdoms, Spanish kingdoms, began to appear Christian kingdoms. We shouldn't say Spanish kingdom, because really the Muslims were Spaniards at that time. The concept of Spain, of course, changes with time, with the passing of time. And the kingdoms appeared first in the north, and then by the end of the Middle Ages, they changed many times. There were 5 kingdoms. One of them, Portugal, the other Castile, which was the largest, the most populated, and the wealthiest of all kingdoms by far. The other, Navarre, more or less the Basque country of Navarre today, linked to France. Aragon, which was not a king, it was not a kingdom. It was several kingdoms. It was a crown. It was Catalonia, Aragon, Valencia, and the Balearic Islands. And they had some territories in the Mediterranean, for instance, Sicily. And the last Muslim kingdom that remained was Grenade. So at that time, at the end of the 15th century, the kingdom of Castile was suddenly without any man occupying the throne. And there were 2 women, one of them the sister of the last king, and the other one, the daughter. That was not clear, that was a legitimate daughter. Okay, and of course, as you can guess, the 2 princes, the most important princes, that is the Portuguese and the Aragonese, pretended one of them, each of them, one of the women. They're going to take Castile. Well, the Aragonese were faster and stronger, and the sister of the king won the battle. She probably had less right, but she won the battle over the daughter, and the Portuguese were expelled. And that's why Castile was united to Aragon and not united to Portugal. It was one of those hazardous things that happen in history, in human history. The fact is that we had one part, a very important part of the Iberian Peninsula that was united under the same kings, Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile. It was not Castile who dominated of Aragon, it was the opposite. Aragon, because the man, of course, was stronger than the woman in those times. And Isabella was very strong, and she kept her rights in many respects. But there were some areas such as foreign policy that he was the one who led that. When they were together and they had a strong army, they decided to attack Granada, and they conquered the last Muslim kingdom. And when Isabella died, she was a little bit older than him, and she died, and Ferdinand married one of the pretenders to the Navarrese throne, and he took Navarre. And that's the form of Spain nowadays. That is the whole Iberian Peninsula except Portugal. This happened 500 years ago, more than 500 years ago. That means that these borders are one of the oldest in Europe, and the most stable part of Europe, right? But it was not an united kingdom. It was never a united kingdom. It was a kind of confederation of kingdoms. The title, in fact, was not the king of Spain or the Spanish king. It was the Catholic king. That was the title that the Pope had given to the Spanish kings after the conquest of Granada. The Catholic kings, or the Hispanic kings. Sometimes they said things like that. Not the King of Spain. And in the documents, of course, they wrote the King of Castile, Aragon, Granada, etc., etc., etc. 30 or 40 titles, not one. It was proper of those things. Okay. Despite this dynastic union, despite having the same king, those kingdoms kept their borders, their customs, their coins, their currency. They have different currency. Their languages. There are many languages, not just 2 or 3. Every valley spoke a little bit different from the other valleys. The people did not travel at those times. And they kept their institutions and their laws, criminal and civil laws. So they were separated, but they were united at least in one aspect, in foreign policy. And there was a war of all of them against France, or against Protestant Britain, or the Protestant world in Northern Europe, or against the Turks, the Muslims, etc. The wars created some kind of unity. More or less, the Spaniards were being united around their loyalty to the king and to religion, Catholicism, since Spain was the Catholic kings were the main defenders of the Pope against Luther and the Protestant Reformation, of course. And some kind of identity was being created. Only one more thing. In those times, the union between Castile and Aragon was 1479. Only in the following 3 centuries, more or less, only one important thing happened in relation to Catalonia, which is the revolt of 1640. In the year 1640, when the Spanish king was making an enormous effort, it was the last confrontation between Catholics and Protestants, and the Spanish king was losing the war, and he was making an enormous effort, and he was demanding for men and money from all their kingdoms, all his kingdoms, and Catalonia wouldn't give any money because we have our laws and we have our parliament, and the parliament does not allow to take our men outside our borders, etc., etc. So the king, who, by the way, at that time had absorbed Portugal also, Philip II absorbed Portugal, the king ordered men and money from Portugal and from Catalonia. And they both rebelled in the year 1640. And Catalonia is more or less this part. And Portugal succeeded and became independent. Catalonia was defeated. Why? Because there was a stronger identity, or because Portugal was stronger economically, etc. No, not at all. Because this is very important in order to understand today's political situation. Because Portugal had foreign support from Britain, Great Britain. And Great Britain did it very well. They supported Portugal, they sent men and boats, and they did not try to integrate Portugal. They did not try to absorb Portugal, while Catalonia had no international support. At some moment, asked for the support of the French. And we will swear loyalty to the French kingdom, but the French kingdom rapidly absorbed Catalonia and sent their men and did more or less the same things as the King of Spain. So the Catalans decided not to be with France either. They were isolated. And if you are isolated, it is very unlikely that you will win in a process of this kind. So Catalonia lost. After that lose, it was 1653 when the war ended. After that defeat, the Catalan language was not forbidden, not at all. Catalan privileges were not annulled, and the Catalan parliament continued, etc., etc. So the king of Spain did what kings did at that time. States were very decentralized, which is, you are my subject, but I recognize your loyalties, your liberties, your privileges, and you will rule yourself for all internal affairs, and I will take care of foreign policy. That's, so nothing changed in 1640. Although in 1640, it's, of course, Catalan nationalist history, that was a national uprising, etc., and they have glorified those facts, and they said they were victims, but nothing particularly grave happened. In the year 700, died the last Habsburg monarch without any heir. Nobody. There was nobody who could succeed him, except a cousin in Austria, who was, of course, the pretender from the point of view of the Habsburg monarchy. But the Bourbon monarchy also had several cousins. They have intermarried many times. And there was another pretender. One of them supported by Britain and Austria, and the other one supported by France. It was an international war, and it was a civil war also. Some part of the nobility and the aristocracy and the good families in Castile supported the Bourbon, and the others the Habsburg. In Catalonia, it was the same. I insist on this, this kind of the civil strife, always civil rebellion, divisions, internal divisions. All societies are complicated. Very rarely are united after one cause. I insist on this because Catalan nationalism says the opposite. We all Catalans, we were supporting the Habsburg, and we were defeated again by the Bourbon. And yes, they were defeated. 1714 was the end of this war. Barcelona finally fell. They had supported the Bourbon at the beginning, but they changed, and the Catalan Cortes gave some money for the Bourbon, but they changed over the course of the war, and they finally supported the Habsburg, and they lost. And that time, 1714, that's the moment when the Bourbon, the new Bourbon king, decided to eliminate all the privileges of the Catalans. Not all, most of them, particularly the self-rule. Their Cortes, their autonomous government, the Generalitat, all that disappeared. Although they kept their civil law and penal law and mercantile law, that was different from the Castilian. That was important. And of course, they kept their language. Languages were not important at that time. They had no political importance at that time. Religion was very important, but the language was not important at that time. Remember that in the Low Countries, in the Netherlands, the division was between Catholic and Protestant. The Catholics was the Belgians, and the Protestants were the Dutch. And of course, today is different, is the language. The Belgians are divided between French-speaking and Flamings. Yeah. Well, okay. So this was the end of the relatively autonomous government. Of course, Catalan nationalist history will tell you that we were democratically ruled at that time. Nobody was democratically ruled at that time. It was the good families of Barcelona, about 60 families, who decided everything. It was an oligarchic republic, kind of oligarchic republic. It was not democratically ruled. And all the peasants, of course, had nothing to do about politics. Nobody. Okay. Again, Catalan nationalist history will tell you, and our decline began at that time. Our decline began when we were united to Castile, and then when we lost our privileges. Again, I'm sorry, if we were talking about history of Spain, I will be fighting against all the myths in Spanish history, but we are talking about Catalonia. I had to fight against the myths in Catalan history. It was not a decline, not at all. It was the opposite. The 18th century was the beginning of the takeoff of the Catalan economy around the textile industry and the integration of the Catalan elite and the Catalan bourgeoisie in the Spanish market, in the colonial market. And they became the wealthiest part of Spain. It began in the 18th century. Catalonia had been a part of Spain not particularly populated, not particularly wealthy, and the beginning of their splendor was exactly the 18th century when they entered the colonial market and the Spanish market. And there were Catalans, for instance, Fray Junípero Serra, a name that you have probably heard sometime, because he was the one who explored California. And he was a Catalan, he was from Mallorca. That in the 16th and 17th century would have been impossible because the empire belonged to the Castilians, not the Catalans, or the Aragonese. Okay, so the 18th century passed without any political protest, without any problem. Catalonia was growing, it was working very well in general. And then the 19th century and what we call contemporary history, what you would call modern history, began in 1808 with the invasion, Napoleonic invasion. The Napoleonic invasion, in Catalan history, nationalist history doesn't mention this because the Catalans behaved in a very, very, very deeply Spanish way. Spanishness was very important. There were two cities that resisted the Napoleonic troops more than any other. And they were Zaragoza, which is Aragon, and the other one, Gerona, the two most heroic cities that suffered the siege for 4, 5, 6 months, and they were finally taken by the French troops, but they resisted more than any other. And the Catalans behaved in a very, not Spanish way, but anti-French. They were more anti-French than anti-Castilian at that time. And the beginning of the 19th century was also the beginning of the liberal revolution in Spain. Following the model of the French Revolution, in Spain, a Cortes, that's a parliament, were summoned, and they met in the city of Cadiz, and they drew the first Spanish constitution, the 1812 constitution. And the role played by the Catalan deputies were very important. They were among the prime movers of the liberal revolution in Spain, and that lasted for most of the century, 70, 80 years, until the 1880s. So, in that time, Catalonia was the wealthiest part of Spain, the most important industrial island in an agrarian country, and the intellectual elites and political elites in Catalonia were the leaders of the liberal revolution in Spain in several moments. The liberal revolution in Spain was very complicated, with several uprisings, several periods, liberal periods. The Catalans were always very important in all of them. I know you perhaps don't know that the street where we are, Prim, was General Prim, Don Juan Prim, who was a Catalan, and was the leader of the Spanish army in the war in Morocco in 1859, and he was the leader of the liberal revolution 1868 that overthrew the Queen Isabella II. And Prim was the strong man, the man who was in control of the situation until he was assassinated. Finally, he died here, very near. The name of the street is because he died in headquarters of the army that was in this street. Okay. And he was a Catalan. Well, but Spain, the political performance of Spain in the 19th century was quite disastrous. Spain lost its empire, while other European powers were building their empires. Spain was unable to carry out the liberal revolution, but in the end, in the end failed. And did not have a constitutional monarchy, a real constitutional monarchy at the end of the century. Spain was underdeveloped from an economic point of view, and there was 2 or 3 times poorer than England or France or Germany, perhaps comparable to Italy at some moments. But then even Italy took off and Spain did not during the 19th century. So the 19th century was quite disastrous in Spanish history. And the end of the 19th century was 1898. That is the Spanish-American War. When the United States entered the war, the Spanish-Cuban War, and defeated Spain. And Spain lost the remains of its empire. And at that moment is when Catalan nationalism began. They have been strongly pro-Spain in all those wars, among other reasons because they were in control of the Cuban market, and they didn't want to lose the control of the Cuban market. And when that market was lost, and the demonstration of the failure of the Spanish state was so clear, they decided that they did not belong to that boat that was sinking, and they were leaving it. Suddenly, in the Spanish, the Catalan political and intellectual elites realized that we are not Catalan, we are not Spanish, we are a different thing. This is Catalan. Same thing happened in the Basque country, which is exactly 1895, when the first important book by Sabino Arana, the founder of the Catalan, of the Basque nationalist party. The same thing. So that was the beginning of the Catalan. There had been some groups in the 10, 15 years earlier, in the 1880s, there had been some groups in Barcelona. Nationalisms are always urban. They begin in cities, where intellectuals can meet and can begin a movement. Although they say that they are rooted in the agrarian real country, etc., but they begin in the cities. Well, there have been some groups in Barcelona who had been designing the flag, the cuatro barras, la señera, the flag that was invented in the 1880s, and it was, of course, the old medieval flag of the Count of Barcelona. It was retaken by the nationalists. They also were thinking about the hymn, the anthem, national anthem, and they decided that their anthem was El Segadors, that they still sing very solemnly nowadays. Every time they're together and they don't know what to do politically, they sing El Segadors, which gives a lot of strength. And El Segadors was a song that came from 1640, from the revolt of the 1640. But it was not a political song. And they changed the words, and they adapted the music to the modern way of writing music, and they spread El Segadors. They decided that the dance was La Sardana, among several other dances. They could have decided other dances. So they decided that the Sardana was the Catalan dance, and they went from Barcelona every Sunday to the villages to teach the people your song, your dance, your way of dressing, which is a way of nationalize people, which is very difficult of all nationalist movements, of course. Well, the 20th century in Spain has been also a complicated century, particularly the first half. There were several political changes. The most important one was in 1931. The Second Republic was declared. In 1936, there was the uprising, the military, the conservative military, the fascist party rose up against the Republic and lasted 3 years. In 1931, the war ended, and General Franco had won the war, and it was the beginning of the dictatorship of General Franco. General Franco lasted in power until his death. It was 1975. So those are the dates that you perhaps could remember if you want to understand this. Since 1975, 2 or 3 years of transition, but we have a constitution of 1978 that is the present constitution in Spain. Okay, so in the Republic, the Spanish Republic decided to be an unitary republic, not federal, but unitary. But it would allow for exceptions. If some provinces, and they were thinking of the Catalans, wanted to have an autonomous government, they could have it, and they could have a self-government in certain matters. But other matters would be kept for the central state. And Catalonia was the first one that presented, the 4 Catalan provinces presented the demand for an institute of autonomy, and there was a region, the name at that time was region, a region considered autonomous, and they have a certain degree of self-government that was important at that moment. 1936, the war broke out, and the Catalans were very much in favor of the Republic, of course, and Madrid was very much in favor of the Republic. All the cities, all important cities were the Republic. It was the countryside and the smaller cities that were with the rebels. So it was, in a sense, it was a war. It was between urban Spain and rural Spain, in a sense. And Madrid was, in fact, the last city to be taken by Franco. Madrid resisted more than any other city in Spain. Although Catalan children are taught nowadays in their schools that it was a war of Spain against Catalonia. And Madrid was the capital of Franco against the Catalans. Well, okay. Not at all. Madrid was bombarded, was bombed more than any other city, and resisted almost 3 years of siege by the Francoist troops. Okay. After the war, 1939, the dictatorship was, among other things, very, very nationalist. It was a conservative dictatorship, of course. It was very Catholic, very much in favor of Catholicism, same as the Republicans have been anti-clerical. But above all, it was in favor of Spain. Spain won, Spain united against separatism, as they said. And that meant any expression of regional cultural identity. Measures were taken, and very, very harsh measures, against the use of Catalan, of the Catalan language, and the use of the Basque language and the Galician language, but above all, Catalan language. There were fines put on people who were in the street and were speaking Catalan, and a policeman could put a fine on that person, or could hit that person, or something like that. It was a very serious humiliation. This is very important because this is in the memory of the Catalans nowadays, and this is, of course, taught in schools every day. What the Spanish did to us. If they would erase Catalan, our language, from the face of the earth, etc. Which is probably true in some very conservative Spaniards. some would do that. Okay, so under Franco, there was a wave of nationalizations in Spanish terms. Everything was very nationalistic. Where we, the children, in 1940s, 1950s, we were taken to camps, and we were taught patriotic songs, and we did parades, military parades, things like that. Of course, the same as the fascist regimes in general. And that's very important. History. Perhaps everything I have said until now has not been very important. This is not really kept in the memory of Catalans nowadays. They keep in the memory of what they have been told at school. But this is important. They keep it, a real memory of that. Because Spanishness was linked to a dictatorship, to brutality, to backwardness, to military. While Catalonia, the Catalan language, it belongs to the private sphere. I express my feelings towards my mother, my sons, etc. in Catalan. While the official language, they have to do when I go to the policeman to write or to fill out the form, it's in Spanish, of course, in Castilian Spanish. So it's the hated language. The public sphere is dominated by Spanish. This is no longer true, because now the Generalitat has an enormous amount in the public sphere that is in Catalan, but they keep the image of the Catalan being repressed by Castilian. And even we, young people in the 1960s, who were against Franco at the university, and we knew that the Catalans were our allies, and to sing a song in Catalan was a very good way to infuriate the conservative professor. So we sang songs in Catalan, of course, and we put Catalan names to our children when we were married. Because in Catalonia, or the Basque Country, we are talking about Catalonia today, or Galicia, but above all Catalonia, were democratic by essence, while Spain was a dictatorship, was authoritarian. There are still people of my age who see a demonstration with many Spanish flags and they feel afraid. Oh, we have the dictatorship here again. What has happened? Has been a coup d'etat today? And no, has been a soccer match. But for us, Spanish flag is still linked to the right conservative feeling and to the dictatorship. Well, what else? And then the present story began. No? Spain has changed a lot since the beginning of nationalism, that is 1 century ago. Spain has changed a lot. Few countries have changed so much as Spain in the 20th century. Spain is finally a democracy, and a stable democracy, with many problems, many failures, of course, but no more than other democracies. Spain is a wealthy country. Finally, the economy took off. Finally, it's an industrialized country, a country of services, and we have a good renta per capita compared to even to other European countries. We're in the middle of the average European countries. Spain is decentralized. One of the things that were done immediately after the Franco's death, General Franco's death, was the decentralization of the Spanish state, which is stronger than any other state in Europe, probably, except Switzerland, which is a confederation. Spain is practically, for all practical purposes, Spain is a federal state, although it is not called federal. About 50%, more than 50%, about 60% of public money is spent by the autonomous communities and the city councils, not by the central state. So it's a fairly decentralized country. Spain is within the European Union, within NATO. It's a respected middle range power in the world. So it's nothing to do. Spain is, that's very important. The economic development of Spain is not unbalanced as it used to be. Spain, the industrial islands were here around Barcelona, around Bilbao, and all the rest was kind of desert, agriculture, not very good agriculture on the other hand. Now, the most important economic center in Spain, and industrial center, is Madrid, although 2 other classical centers are there. But Seville has a good kind of development. There is some development in some cities in Galicia, etc., etc. So Spain is much more balanced than, let's say, Italy, where the differences between Milan and Sicily are enormous. In Spain, they're not so great. It's much more balanced country than it used to be. And that's very important politically, because one of the reasons why Catalan nationalism emerged is because the most important city from an economic and industrial point of view, that was Barcelona, had to obey the orders from an underdeveloped village that was Madrid. At that time, that doesn't happen anymore. That has changed. But nationalism keeps the same discourse and keep the same struggle in order to have more powers, more resources, etc. Up to now, this has been a problem of elite. Has been a challenge between peripheral elites and the Madrid elite. But now, with the Catalan problem, it is becoming a problem of the population also. In Spain, there were no communitarian clashes, no problem, nothing to do with the former Yugoslavia, where the Croats and the Serbs wouldn't go to the same cafe, they wouldn't intermarry, they wouldn't almost speak to each other. In Spain, there's no problem. There has never been a fight in a Barcelona cafe between Catalan speakers and Castilian speakers, never. There's a coexistence of those two cultures without much problem. But with the events of this last year, it could happen that this kind of clashes would begin. It could happen. Well, there are many other things that we could talk about this, but if you want to...
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the summary of 500 years of history. It's been impressive. Thank you very much. And now we have about 15 to 20 minutes for questions. So, yeah, we have some questions. Ben.
Yeah, I had a quick question about the way the money is spent in the autonomous regions. So, if 60% of the budget of the government is being spent by the autonomous regions.
No, and the city councils.
Right.
And the city councils.
So how, like, what metric is used to distribute that money to different regions? Like, how do they split it up in the different areas?
Well, that's very poorly done, I think, because in principle, the taxes are collected by the central government, except in the Basque Country and Navarre, where the situation is the opposite. Taxes are collected by the Basque and the Navarrese, and then they give some amount of money to Madrid for the common services that they receive. But in the rest of the country, Madrid collects the taxes and it transfers some money to the regions according to the services that you have to supply.
So they kind of just choose based on the region which they give to each population?
Based on the territory, the population, the renta per capita, etc. It's a very complex calculation, and of course, there are always problems. This is a mistake. This is something that should be solved now. If they really change the constitution, they should state clearly which taxes are collected by you, and it's your responsibility how you spend it, and which taxes are collected by me. But this, since the constitution is not totally federal, is not clearly stated.
Vic has a question. Vic.
So I have a question about the authority of the local government. So I read from the Spanish media that Catalonian has their own police force, for example, also, and they have more like authority, like local power power to the local government than most of the other autonomous regions. So I'm also very curious about and a lot of the power was given to the region by the former party that occupied the parliament of Spain for a long time. And I'm just wondering, how is the political struggle happening here in Madrid affecting what's going on in Catalonia?
Yeah, of course it affects.
I know there's a new party, the PP, like that was elected after the economic crisis, and they're like right now pointing fingers at each other.
Yeah, the political situation in Madrid affects Catalonia and the Basque Country in a very important way, because if the political party who is in Madrid is the Socialist Party, the left tends to be more liberal, let's say, softer towards Catalan demands, while the right, the PP, tends to be tougher. But in both cases, if you don't have the absolute majority, Spanish parliament has 350 seats. So you need 176 to have the majority. If you don't have, you have 169, you need 7 seats. And the Catalan party has 7 seats. They offer you 7 seats in exchange for more transfers, more money, more autonomy. And this has happened with the Socialists and with the PP, with the Conservative Party, with both. And this is a problem. Again.
Joe.
This is somewhat of a related question, but in the lead up to the 2015 elections, like he was talking about, it seemed like there was going to be an opening in the Spanish political sphere in many ways, with two new parties obviously gaining national representation. But since then, it seemed like things have kind of reached a whole new level of gridlock, and then added with what's going on in Catalonia right now, how close does this run to a constitutional crisis for Spain?
No. Dice que quisiera ver que si es una crisis constitucional el hecho de que haya partidos en... Not necessarily, shouldn't be a constitutional crisis. It's a problem, it's a political problem. Because we have 2 party systems. One, the national, another one, the regional. And the majorities here are different from there. Even people tend to vote in a different way. In Catalonia, for instance, Catalan parties do not win majorities. Catalan nationalist parties do not win majorities in the general elections because more or less everybody votes, while they win majority in the Catalan elections because the non-Catalan people, those people who have been there only 50 years and they don't speak Catalan, they don't feel concerned with those, and they don't vote. For instance, in Catalonia, the most spread family name is García, or Pérez, or González. That is Castilian names. You go to the Catalan parliament, there are no Garcías, no Pérez, or no González. These people don't go to Catalan politics. In Catalan politics, you have Catalan names, a Catalan pedigree. It's funny. There are two political systems. It's a kind of distortion that people feel that I shouldn't vote for that and I shouldn't be represented there because I'm not really Catalan. I was not born here. There's an American who was working with me at some time, Jeff Miley, who has written a wonderful book about the distortions in Catalan politics and the names, the majority names in the Catalan society and majority names in Catalan politics, which has nothing to do.
Why do you think Portugal was able to secure foreign support from Great Britain in 1640?
Well, they were an ally of Great Britain, and the British were interested in the Portuguese Empire, and and there has been a tradition since the Middle Ages that Portugal has been an ally to England, to the Kingdom of England at that time. So Britain became the protector of Portugal, and Portugal has existed. I'm sorry if there's a Portuguese here. I hope he or she doesn't need psychiatric help. Portugal has existed because it was a protectorate of England, Britain. Because of course you can understand that the armies, the Spanish army, the population is much bigger, and the invasion of Portugal was relatively easy. But Portugal was protected by the first power in the world. It was Britain. So it was a kind of protectorate.
So what's in it for Britain then? Like why did Britain?
Why?
¿Por qué?
Why?
Why did Britain choose to protect Portugal?
Why? Because it was its ally, and they were together in some imperial adventures. They were occupying Africa and Asia together, the Portuguese and the British, until they fought. At the end of the 19th century, they fought, because you know that Africa. This is funny. Africa was more or less like this, and the Portuguese had Angola and Mozambique, and they wanted to join Angola and Mozambique, but the British had South Africa, and they wanted to join. So they fought for
Over
and
the
of course,
cake.
the British won. Needless to say, the British won. But that was in the 1890s. That was relatively late.
Maeve, you had a question first.
From a historic or a historic scholarly perspective, are there documents that Catalan nationalists focus on? Like, are there particular, you know, the U.S. like Constitution, Declaration of Independence? Are there physical documents that they base their kind of views and perspectives from, or is it more kind of this cultural versus
Well, it depends. It depends on what kind of Catalan nationalism you are defending. If you are saying that Catalonia was independent in the Middle Ages and we want to go back to that situation, there are no documents that can validate that, because Catalonia has never been independent. It was a part of the Kingdom of Aragon. The same, it happened with the Kingdom of Aragon, the same as with Castile. Because the Kingdom of Aragon was, the royal throne was empty. It was a woman. And the Prince of Barcelona, the Count of Barcelona, married that woman. So it was Catalonia in a way that occupied Aragon, no? Similar to what happened in Castile. But of course, there have been, in old times, documents were forged. They were simply false documents. Nowadays, we know that documents are those documents are, and we cannot trust those documents. But in some relatively good academic meetings, such as in the year 2014, in the third centennial of the 1714 defeat, there was an academic congress entitled Spain against Catalonia. That was the title. In order to remember that war, that was not at all a war between Spain and Catalonia, but and good academics did not go to that meeting. But there were others who were led by their nationalism, and they had the Congress, and they had a lot of money, needless to say, given by the Generalitat.
We have two questions.
Do you want to read them?
Let me
At the
see.
bottom of the chat.
We have a couple of questions from Middlebury, from Marcos Roena Madrazo, Professor Marcos Roena Madrazo. What is the influence of relatively recent immigrants to Catalonia from outside of Spain and their children in this debate of nationalism and Catalan identity? Do they feel more of an entitlement to participate in regional politics? What's the role of immigrants?
That's very important. That's a very important question. Immigration has been very important in all this process. There was a first wave of immigration at the end of the 19th century, between 1880 and 1910. And that was the beginning of Catalan nationalism. So they felt threatened by so many people who did not speak Catalan and were living there. So our language is going to die. And there was a second wave in the 1950s and 1960s. An enormous amount of Andalusians in other parts of Spain went to Barcelona. And the same thing happened, was also the revival of Catalanism. And these people do not feel entitled, as I said, do not feel entitled to vote because they don't feel they are totally Catalan. Or sometimes they do the opposite and they begin to speak Catalan, only Catalan, as a way of climbing up socially and to be integrated. I remember when I first went to California, there was a book, Learn Spanish to Speak with Your Servant, with your cleaning woman. Well, in Catalonia, it was something like that. A normal Catalan family spoke Catalan, except with the cleaning person with whom they spoke Castilian. So the lower classes, they do not feel they have political rights. They do not feel they have the rights to vote and to have a say in the future of this country, of that country. No? And what was the well? And then there is another aspect of immigration that is very important. We, Spain, this is not a country of immigration nowadays. Since the 1980s, this is a country of immigration. Many Latin Americans and Romanians and Maghrebis, people from Morocco, etc., have come to this country. About 6, 7, 8 million of people who live in Spain nowadays come from this immigration. This should change the nationalist problem, because these people do not feel Catalan or do not feel Castilian at all. And the opposite reaction would happen. Would be a very ugly reaction, but very normal. That is, the Catalan and Castilians were together against these people who are stealing our jobs and things like that, as the conservatives say. So it could change the problem. It could create new political problems, some of them very ugly, as I say, but not expressed in a nationalistic way.
We have another question from Mark. According to the Spanish Constitution, does the central government have future jurisdiction on the Catalonian police and government once the election of December 21st is over? Or do you think residents and companies will continue to move out of Catalonia? For example, if the Catalonian police and government start to execute actions towards another referendum, can the central government interfere at any time? And how do you prevent such a referendum from happening again?
Yeah, the Spanish government could interfere according to the Article 155 if there is an autonomous community that is behaving in a way that puts in serious danger the national interest. The central government can intervene under certain conditions, etc. So, but now, at this moment, the plan is very clear, and the government has said it very clearly, that after December 21st, after the elections, they will withdraw from Catalonia and the new government will take over and the situation will go back to normal.
I think somebody else had a question over here, Emily.
Yeah, I was wondering, do you think that the Catalonian government actually thinks it would be economically feasible and beneficial to secede from Spain, given the fact that they wouldn't be recognized by the EU and they would be cutting ties with the Spanish market? Like, how is that economically feasible?
Good question.
Well, Catalonian government, first of all, allow me to say it doesn't exist at this moment. So, but the Catalan nationalists who used to be in the government until 2 weeks ago, they said that, yeah, that the situation wouldn't change. They would remain in Europe, and no enterprises would leave Catalonia, and there would be no economic problem whatsoever. They wouldn't be isolated. But of course, it seems that reality is very opposite to those. That's a way of thinking. That's wishful thinking.
Vic has another question and another one.
What do you think that the Spanish central government, what do you think Madrid could learn from, I would say, its pacification of the Basque independence movement? When I was in Bilbao, I heard a lot about the ETA, the terrorist group. ETA. And I'm just curious. I don't know whether you think something so nationalistic, something so extreme will also happen in Spain, in Catalonia.
No. It has been, the situation has been completely different, fortunately. The Catalan movement, one has to admit, it has been peaceful, basically peaceful. even joyful in some of its demonstrations. Nothing to do with the Basque situation. The Basques were less strong. Basque nationalists, radical Basque nationalists, pro-independence, were never more than 20-25%, never more than that. So they decided to enter the way of terrorism, violence, political violence, the war. That began in the 1960s. In 1960s, if you don't know, that was the moment when political tensions were very high in Europe, and several violent groups emerged in Europe. IRA, of course, in Ireland, the Brigate Rosse in Italy, of course, and the Baader-Meinhof in Germany, etc. And in Spain, it was ETA, Euskadi Askatasuna, which is Basque Country and Freedom. And that began, has some cultural element also, because it began in Catholic circles. In Catholicism, Basque Catholicism had been very extremely conservative and had inspired 3 civil wars in the 19th century, the so-called Carlist wars. And they began this little war again that lasted for more than 40 years, and it has taken about 900 lives. Fortunately, nothing like that has ever happened in Catalonia. And Catalans pride themselves of being civilized, not very violent, etc.
We have another question.
I was wondering if Catalan nationalism is something that's taught in the public schools, or if it's more a political ideal that's discussed in public in general or passed down.
In public schools, and in public TV.
Yeah. Can you talk a bit about how it's translated?
This was one of the concessions made by the central government in the 1980s. They left the cultural politics and policies and education in the hands of the Catalan government. And the Catalan government decided that all children in Catalonia should be immersed in Catalan, and they should learn in Catalan. Everything is taught in Catalan except in one matter, which is Castilian language. That's taught in Castilian. The Second Republic, 1931, that was the only precedent that we have for this situation, also established, as I said, that there will be autonomous regions, etc. And they could have a teaching system in their local language. But the Spanish state kept for itself the privilege to set up another system in Spanish, in Castilian Spanish. And this was not respected in the 1980s. So nowadays, if you go to Catalonia, you have to send your children to a Catalan school, which is something that I hope could be changed also if there are important constitutional changes now.
Does that include universities also?
No, the university is free, but the universities are usually very ideologically driven, and most classes are in Catalan, although every professor can choose language.
How do you see this change of discourse that the Catalans are having now? Like the independence was somehow symbolic, that maybe there are another solutions that are not independence. How do you read that type of double discourse?
Well, I think they're very feeble at this moment. They are very weak. They don't know what to say, and they don't know how to avoid prison. And they are falling backwards. They really, Puigdemont did not want to declare independence. He wanted to do symbolic things, but not exactly declaring independence, and he was forced to do it by the radicals. Situation in Catalonia was parliamentary situation in Catalonia until now. I mean, until December 21st, when the parliament changes, was very complicated because the Catalan nationalists had called elections in 2015, September 2015, and they said they were plebiscitarian elections. It was a kind of referendum. If you vote for us, if 51% of the Catalans vote for us, and we will go all together, united. If you vote for us, it means that you want Catalonia to be independent. We will declare independence, etc., etc. That is a plebiscite, a kind of referendum. They did not win. They won it 42%. But there was another 10% with the coup. It's a kind of anarchist group, anti-system group, anti-capitalism, anti-free market, anti-European Union, anti-NATO, etc. And this group gave that 10%, so they have 52%. But they depended on this group. And this moment, Puigdemont did not want to declare independence, but his radical supporters said, yes, you declare independence now. And he did it, and he left for Brussels.
I think one question.
He wanted to leave Spain, and he left Spain.
Let's have the students first. Monica, over here.
Yes, thank you. So going a little bit off the question, and based on the historical context you presented tonight, it seems like the Kingdom of Castilla / later on Madrid government has done a lot of unilateral actions. Do you think that going on from now, what's happening right now in Catalonia, they're going to have more multilateral actions in order for them to get more power or more rights that they used to have before 1714?
I don't think that the rights before, I agree with everything you have said, except the last 5 words. The situation before 1714 had nothing to do with the present situation. This was a world of privileges. It was not a world of democracy. It was not a world of self-rule. It was a world that this valley belongs to me, to my family. And you, the king, you don't interfere with my rights, because this valley has belonged to my family for 700 years. It has nothing to do with the present situation. So what I hope is that the present situation will evolve in the sense that you were hinting at. So that there will be some kind of negotiation. The Spanish right, the Conservative Party, the PP, will understand that they have to take very seriously the Catalan problem and the Basque and the Galician, because you cannot solve one problem and leave the other two, although the serious problem is the Catalan one, of course. So they will sit on the table, I hope. There will be reasonable rulers in Catalonia that will sit on the table, and the Spanish government should respond reasonably also. They should change the constitution, they should organize a federal system, a truly federal system. They should organize clearly which powers belong to you and which powers remain in the hands of the central government, which money, which taxes are you going to have, and which ones you will keep, I will keep, etc. And they will, and there should be kind of referees, institutions arbitrales, how do you say? Mediators, some kind of mediators, such as the Constitutional Tribunal that should be formed with magistrates from all the communities, the Spanish communities. And even perhaps we should think of having not one capital of the kingdom, of the country, but several capitals. Barcelona is a very important city. It's as important as Madrid. More or less the same number of inhabitants and same economic weight, same cultural weight. Come on, let's have the Senate in Barcelona, for instance. Not everything in Madrid. I hope some agreement, reasonable agreement, will be negotiated next year.
Two more questions, because I know we could spend hours and hours talking. I don't know if Dennis, you wanted to ask a question. Oscar.
Who are the radical nationalists that pushed Puigdemont to declare independence, and what motivated them to want to be independent? Was it an event, or was it just ideological indoctrination?
No, not exactly. It's a very radical group called CUP. In the old anarchist tradition in Catalonia, CUP, Center for Unidad Popular, Coordinadora de Unidad Popular, something like that. I don't know exactly the name. And they really want to destroy the state and destroy the free market. They are again in favor of socialist communitarian power, kind of assemblies where everything is decided, something like that. So they wanted to destroy the Spanish state by creating a second state in Catalonia, and then destroy the Catalan state. They said it.
Are they? But they're not elected, are they?
Yeah, 10, they have 10 seats. Yeah. I hope one of the things that is going to happen in September and December 21st is that they will go down to half of that.
Okay, one last question. I don't know, Kate or Dennis. Dennis?
I just have a question. Comparing this situation to something that happened 2 years ago in the United Kingdom with the voting of Scotland, it seemed like that was a much more straightforward process where the government let them vote and they decided that they ended up staying, but it seemed that it was handled with more tact and more diplomacy than what happened here. So I wonder why you think that, why that might be the case, and going forward, if again, if in the elections in December, the same leaders come to power, how do you think the Spanish government will deal with that going forward? Implement something like that.
Well, the second question is much easier to answer. I don't know. If the results are more or less the same as they were before, the situation is going to be very, very different. As for the first question, Scotland, yes, Scotland was a model. Of course, the situation is different from a historical point of view. Scotland was an independent kingdom for several centuries. Then it joined Great Britain the same way. It was a Scottish king who came to the throne of the kingdom of England, not the opposite, and with the Stuarts. And then there was an agreement, and the parliament, the Scottish parliament, was dissolved, merged into the British parliament, and now in the last 30 years there has been a devolution process. It's different than the Catalonian case. Catalonia was never an independent state, and so there is no provision in the Spanish constitution that any one part of the state of Spain can separate, can decide to separate. Well, the same happened in the United States in 1860, didn't it? Some states in the South said, oh, no, we don't agree with your policies in relation to slavery, so we will go away. You are going to go away? The war. States usually don't allow one part of their territory to decide if they keep in the union or they go away. But of course, having said that, I agree that the Scottish way was much more civilized. And I would like to have had a solution similar to Scotland. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for all of your great questions. And thank you, Dr. Álvarez Junco, for your time. And thank you also for all who are on the other side of the ocean and from all the different parts of Spain. I'm sorry that we didn't have time to answer to all of your questions. Good night, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.